gravitational force is an invisible force that pulls all objects toward each other. It can act upon anything that has mass. It doesn't matter if your object weighs 4 grams or even 13 kilograms. Even though the gravitational force is the weakest force of all four, it has an infinite range, meaning that it can still work all across the world. In 1665, Isaac Newton was laying under an apple tree. Later, an apple fell and he was super duper curious on what made it fall. He knew that there had to be something pulling it, otherwise it wouldn't fall. He tried many different experiments to prove his theory. Finally, he thought of one, but he didn't actually perform it. It was proven by the cannonball thought experiment. He thought if they were to put a cannon on the top of a mountain, the cannon would not shoot in a straight line. If gravity was applied, it would start traveling downward. The gravitational force is used by everything, everywhere. It's what holds the Earth in orbit around the Sun, keeps the Moon in orbit around the Earth, and keeps all the planets in the solar system. It's also what keeps you on the ground, stops us from floating away into the air. If you jump, gravity will pull you back down. However, if there's little to no gravity, like on the Moon, you won't come down as speedy as you would on the Earth. Without gravity, everything would float. People, animals, houses, shoes, hair ties, apples, fridges, and everything else. Even the planet would be floating around in the solar system.
The force experienced by electrons in a wire loop when they are close to a shifting magnetic field impacts humans because of exposure to electric, magnetic, and electromagnetic fields that can have immediate negative consequences on our health. Strong enough low-frequency fields can cause dizziness, light flashes, and tingling or pain by stimulating the nerves in the body. In its most basic form, electromagnetic force is when a conductor is put in a magnetic field and current runs through the conductor. The magnetic field and the current interact with each other to produce force. The heating of biological tissues is the primary consequence of radio frequency electromagnetic waves. Short-term exposure to extremely high electromagnetic field levels can have a negative overall impact on the human body.
The strong interaction or strong force is a fundamental interaction that combines quarks into protons, neutrons, and other hydrogen particles. It holds them all together into the nucleus and is what makes energy release in nuclear reactions. It binds quarks together into chunks and clusters that then turn into subatomic particles, known as protons and neutrons. A Japanese psychiatrist named Hideki Yukawa proposed the first theory for this new force in 1935, proposing that nucleons would exchange particles with one another and that this mechanism would produce the force. Stars' ability to shine is also explained by the strong nuclear force. The strong force within the nucleus is released in a star, which is essentially a massive nuclear furnace. Only a tiny portion of the light from the sun would be produced, for instance, as if its energy were produced by burning coal instead of nuclear power. The fundamental particles, known as quarks, which make up protons and neutrons of atomic nuclei, are held together by the strong force, as do protons and neutrons themselves. As a result, the strong force is in charge of maintaining the fundamental stability of matter.
While the other fundamental forces hold things together, the weak force plays a role in things falling apart or decaying. Despite being more powerful than gravity, the weak force, or weak interaction, only works across relatively small distances. It works at the subatomic level and is essential for the creation of elements and the powering of stars. According to the Thomas Jefferson National Accelerator Facility, it is also much to blame for the natural radiation that exists in the universe.
The discovery of the weak force is said to have been inspired by Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, who in 1933 created a theory to explain beta decay, the process by which a neutron in a nucleus changes into a proton and expels an electron, also known as a beta particle in this context. In Particles of Man, an article published in 2013, Italian physics historian Giulio Maltus wrote that he defined a new type of force, the so-called weak interaction, that was responsible for decay and whose fundamental process was transforming a neutron into a proton, an electron, and a neutrino. The weak force has an even shorter range than the strong force because it behaves differently inside individual nucleons. The weak force is important in the nuclear fusion that occurs in the sun. Nuclear fusion, which is also dependent on the weak force to work, has also been created in laboratories.